What's up guys, I hope you're all doing well today, and welcome back to another quick guide video. So today we're going to be going over one of my favorite single target damage dealers in the game, Savanna of the Dragon Scale Marsh faction. She's a really cool character that does a lot of damage and can be really useful. And you can actually acquire her through the hero synthesis in the altar. So it can take a little bit to get her, but she is free to play friendly, seeing that you can simply collect up heroes, build a few of these lower tier ones, and then craft her yourself. So we're going to start by going over her kit, because it is a bit of an interesting one, and I think a lot of people think she's a niche or not very useful in some places because of the way her kit works, but I'm here to tell you otherwise. I've been using her as one of my main damage dealers in Armored Incursion and in the Queen of Tides dungeon, where she's done very well in both. So let's go over this here. So her trait is, upon death, grants 50% of this character's attack to a random ally when she's ascended, which only takes two copies to make it there. It's 100%. So basically what this does is if she dies in a fight, a little buff from her will float out and go attach itself to another character and adds 50 or 100% of whatever her attack is to that character. So if you're rolling Armored Incursion, and you've got 3 damage dealers and a support, you've got a pretty good chance of this buff going over to one of your other attackers and adding a lot of damage. So currently fighting the green Armored Incursion, which she is affinity neutral to, so she's not quite as strong here at the moment, but she still does a lot of damage and works well in the team. But this trait has worked out well for me, because fighting green, I've been using Aurak and Hector on my team, also along with her and one support. And very often this trait has popped over to one of my other 2 damage dealers, whether it's Aurak or Hector, and it adds a lot of damage to them. So I was kind of skeptical at this at first when I was reading it for the first time, just kind of wondering how it would be useful and how often you'd even see it do anything. And granted, it's not super common, but being an attacker, she tends to have a little less health, so she is usually one of the first ones to die. And so this buff just ends up getting you extra damage on other characters throughout the whole rest of the fight. So it's actually pretty nice. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but it's a nice little addition to her kit. So before we move to her actual abilities, what makes her an odd character is her 2, or the special, and her ult both start on cooldown. So when you start the fight, you will not be able to use the special or ult. They're on cooldown. And then all of her abilities reduce the cooldowns along with the amount of turns she takes, per normal, reducing the cooldown in order to rotate through her abilities. Which definitely means she's not as good in somewhere like Arena, where you kind of start the fight and round 1 you're trying to pop ults and just dunk on everybody really quickly. So she's definitely not as good in an area like that, but she is good at dealing out a lot of damage in the long run, which is why I tend to use her in dungeons and Armored Incursion. So her A1 deals 100% damage to an enemy, reduces all the character's cooldowns by 1, so her 2 and her ult. Her 2 deals 200% damage to an enemy and reduces all the character's cooldowns by 2. If she crits, it grants crit damage up 2 for 1 turn to herself. This ability's cooldown is at its max duration. That's just saying that it's off cooldown. That's just saying that it's on cooldown when you start the fight. But if you crit with the special, you get a buff that does 50% more crit damage. And then usually, if you use the 1, the 2, and then with turns rolling through, then her ult would be off cooldown and ready to use. And the ult deals 300% damage to an enemy and grants Revenge, which is stackable at the start of battle. This ability's cooldown is at its max duration. So what this does is it hits really hard and grants her 1 permanent stack of Revenge up to 3 times. Now this exponentially increases her attack, so across an entire Armored Incursion battle, if you get to 2 or 3 stacks of this, it can up her damage by like several thousand easily, just because of how much attack it adds. So it's a really strong skill. I want to say I've had this one hit for 14, almost 15,000 regularly. Obviously that can change, depend on whether you have like defense down, damage taken up, debuffs on the enemy, or attack up on her and whatnot, but I want to say around 15,000 is what I've had this one hit for, which is a pretty strong hit. And mine is, she's built decently. I've still got a few pieces of gear I need to rotate out and switch around, which I'll show you here in a moment once we go over her basic stats. But yeah, she does a lot of damage. She's been probably my highest damage dealer in Armored Incursion for several weeks now. Obviously, she's not good against the red one, being a green, but that's a pretty common issue with damage dealers, is affinity matching. Alright, let's move into my stats on her. So I have 4,400 attack, 12,000 health, a little over 1,000 defense, 126 speed, which is another point with her is because of trying to set up for big damage, I don't like her to go first in my team. I like her to be a little on the slower side, so I don't go with speed boots on her at all. As long as she's faster than enemies in the dungeon or armored incursion, it's perfectly fine. I like her to go last so that everybody else on the team can get all of the debuffs on the enemy first, such as defense down, damage taken up, any of those other damage dealing type debuffs. I like them to go before her just to set her up for even more damage. I've got 80% crit rate, which hurts me all the time, but we're working towards getting a little higher crit rate because my goal is to hit 100% crit. How soon it happens depends on how lucky I get with drops from Queen of Tides, but as we'll go into that when we look over the gear. And then I have just shy of 200% crit damage. Same thing, I'm going to be moving into getting a crit damage ring, hopefully with crit rate substats eventually, and then try to adjust this around so we can get some more crit damage and crit rate out over here. So that is the hope. And then you don't really need focus because she doesn't place any debuffs. Alright, so now we'll look at the gear. I have a very, very weird set of gear that I got early on that has kind of somehow ended up having my best stats. So as you can see, I have 2 sets of life gear and 1 attack gear. It's very weird, I know. But as you can see here, crit rate roll, crit damage roll, attack, let's see, defense, a little crit damage. This one could definitely be switched out. I just have not switched that one around yet. I mean, crit damage 2 times, crit rate, a little attack, some defense, decent attack boots, a little extra health, which I still don't mind having a little extra health on her just so that in the longer battles she doesn't go down as easily. And then as you can see here, another 2 roll on crit damage. Crit rate ring. Sadly, this ring does kind of suck, other than having 3 rolls into attack percentage, which is pretty much the main reason this ring has not gone away yet, because that's a 20% attack boost is pretty strong, along with a little health. And then another big life ring with 50% attack, 1 roll onto crit rate, and then a little defense, and then some other little garbage stats there. So as you can see, there's still even more that can be achieved with her, and she's still hitting insanely hard. So she's very easy to build. I do have her glyphs all done and her abilities all done, but overall she's been a very strong character for me. So the first main place I use her is in the armored incursion. Now I run her alongside Hector, who does the increased damage taken debuff on the enemy, and then also Aurak, who has a defense down on his A1, so I like to have her go after them. They both set up with their debuffs, and then even being affinity neutral, she'll come through and deal a ridiculous amount of damage. And then I want to say I have Brand as my support currently. We'll go look at that here. Yep, so I have Brand currently as my support in this team. So they don't live a super long time, seeing that the only real support is the 1 spell and his shield every single turn, but also getting an extra attack up and the defense up from his ult just sets me up to do even more damage. And currently, right now, I'm sitting at right about 269, 270,000 damage roughly. I want to say I got like 272 last rotation where it was green. But either way, I'm hitting up pretty good here with a level 23 chest. I'm still not, the top of the game yet, but we're doing pretty good damage for a free-to-play. And then over here in the dungeons. So the main one I use her in is my Queen of Tides, which I will show you my setup for. As you can see, I'm almost beating 12. So for here, I have 2 healers, a heal spell, and the buff removal / stun spell for taking off the Queen of Tides buffs that she stacks up across the fight. And then my damage is brought in from Savanna and Santis, who's the poisoner. So this comp has worked pretty well. I've been farming stage 11 with like a 90-ish% win rate. So this is not the A1, top tier speed farming team, but they've been getting it done, having the 2 supports, and then the poison damage for the boss and the side minions, and then Savanna with her pretty nutty damage has been doing a really good job at clearing it out and not dying regularly. So this has been my team there. And then you could use her, in fact I believe I do use her in the Roaring Tulpa. I believe currently I've got it switched up a little bit because I'm trying Valeria for wave clear, just to see if I can be doing it faster, and I recently started using Hector here, because I want to say I only got him about a few weeks ago, I want to say. So it's a little changed up, but I have been using her in my Roaring Tulpa team, and she does just fine. Especially her big ult can really help you clear off this guy's shield. So she is really useful in either of those, obviously. Negative affinity, wouldn't be using her in Ash Magisteria very much, and as you can see, I don't really focus this dungeon very much at the moment. And then she would be perfectly useful in both Witch of the Wind and Gemini Dragon, being affinity neutral. So she'd also be very strong here. You could use her in some alternate content like Void Towers, or some of the bounty hunt stages where things have insane amounts of health. Being a little squishier, it might be kind of tough to fit her in some of these areas. So the main places I use her is in those dungeons. Also the ability dungeons, she just does a nutty amount of damage, so you really can't go wrong anywhere here but in Flame Lizard, just because we're at affinity. But she's really strong, guys. Like I said, the way the cooldowns work is a little weird. I think that's why probably a lot of people don't really care for her, just because you can't start the fight and ult right off the bat for insane damage. But she can get a lot of damage in across a whole fight, guys. If you end up pulling her or need to do the Synthesize the Hero, foodie guide or whatever it is, I definitely recommend you give her a look and see if she's something that could fit in one of your teams well, because she's done a lot of damage for me, and she's been really helpful at clearing some of those higher end dungeon and armored incursion content. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope this gave you a better idea of what Savanna can do, and hopefully you can find a good place for her in your team. And I hope you guys all have a good rest of your day. I'll see you next time. Bye.